So Alabama won a football game yesterday, 17-3. Congratulations to the Tide. I know most of you, if you didn't start watching that game, you eventually found yourself watching that game on what the casuals told you would be a dud Saturday. We got Bama up against the wall. We got Texas tied with Wyoming in the fourth quarter. We got a couple of field stormings nationally. Never let the casuals fool you into thinking it's going to be a dull Saturday. Never happens that way, does it? Never turns out that way. So it certainly didn't here. Alabama's inexplicably playing an out-of-conference game in Tampa, Florida. Last time they were in that building, I was there, but it was a little higher stakes matchup. It was against Clemson for a national championship. And so we watched what we saw yesterday. Now, what did you take away from this game? Very curious what the nation thought. I know you thought Bama looked terrible. Everyone thought that. I want to know, though, like if you peel back the layer, so look beneath the surface, what did you think about this? Because the more I got into watching it, the more I found myself thinking, that's the most disturbing game I've ever seen Alabama play under Nick Saban. You may think to yourself, Josh, in 2007, weren't they pretty bad? Well, yeah, they went 7-6. They had a bunch of one-possession losses, as I recall. But that wasn't disturbing. No one expected them to compete under Nick Saban in year one. In fact, it was all about flushing out the program. It was all about getting rid of the guys who didn't need to be there. It was about getting Nick Saban's guys in. Everyone was looking forward to the Julio Jones, Marcel Darius, Mark Barron recruiting class that was incoming. So no one was deterred. Even when they lost to Louisiana Monroe, I thought the following Monday, Saban had like his best press conference he's ever had there. There was eternal optimism. Even in that year one when things were bad. That stuff yesterday, for lack of a much more appropriate term, because it is, after all, a family show, was so totally disturbing. Not because it was a close game against a vastly inferior opponent, but because of how effortless the game was, how lifeless the team looked. And I thought I saw what I saw, but then a bunch of coaches started texting me afterwards and kind of independently confirmed what my feel was. I don't feel like a critical mass of Alabama's team gave max effort yesterday. I thought dudes flat out mailed in the game. I'm not talking about collectively, because there were individual performances and there were individual guys that were willing to go over the cliff. But it takes a lot more than just individuals. You got really, really high-level All-American caliber individuals that'll play on 7 and 5 teams this year. So it takes way more than that. I could find you like 24 teams yesterday that played at a higher level and played with more effort than Alabama. Now, the problem for most of them is they're not as talented as Alabama. And the problem for Alabama is they're talented enough to get by doing that. But I told you during the spring with this quarterback battle, and I reiterated it again in the fall with the quarterback battle, the same way I do with all quarterback battles. And that's the locker room's going to tell you who QB1 is on your team. The locker room ended up gravitating towards Jalen Milroe on this team. That doesn't mean the locker room views him as being without fault. I don't know that everyone in that locker room is in love with Jalen Milroe, but they probably view him as the guy that gives them the best chance to win. The staff started him in week one. Things were great. Things were good enough. The staff started him against Texas. He was deer in headlights. I thought that was also combined with a very, very poor game plan that was put together that did not feature his strengths. He got benched. And Tyler Buckner, Notre Dame transfer, started this game. Some of the worst quarterback play you'll ever see in a crimson or white uniform. And then Ty Simpson comes in. And while there were flashes and probably not a fair position for him to be in, I think it made it abundantly clear Jalen Milroe actually does give this team the best chance to win. But here was the other thing you saw. You saw what the team thought about it. It's not the first time you've ever seen it. It's just the first time you've ever seen it with Bama. When a guy gets put under center, when a guy gets put at the quarterback position that a critical mass of that locker room does not agree with, they'll let you know with their effort and with their level of play. And the level of play you saw from Bama yesterday is so far below what they would call the Bama standard, I don't even know what to make of it. Like, look, we got a computer model where we try and ingest the numbers and the critical data from games, and we try and formulate a forward-thinking, advanced-looking number on future games. I don't even know how to interpret what we saw yesterday. Because the thing about it is when you have a team that lacks intensity and they lack effort, no amount of talent matters. There is no bottom. Like, there's no floor to limit how far you can fall and how decrepitly bad you can look. Never used the word decrepit on the show before, but here it is. That's where we are with Alabama football in week 3. Look, these aren't padlock stats because they won the game, but they gave up 5 sacks again. Yeah, if you want me to take this moment in time to admit I may have been a little bit wrong, just a little bit misguided regarding Alabama's offensive line. If you'd like me to do that tonight, listen up, quiet the room. I may have been wrong about Alabama's offensive line. If you know anything about me, you know how difficult this is to admit in September. They gave up 5 sacks. That makes back-to-back games. Never happened before under Nick Saban, I don't think. 8 tackles for loss yesterday. It should be stressed, this one's against South Florida. 107 pass yards, anemic. This is not the metric system, by the way. This is just actual stats from the stat sheet. 5 straight punts to start the game. And then there was a lightning delay, as is customary in the state of Florida. So I probably got 100 texts, if I got one, that said after the game, oh boy, Ole Miss is about to go in there and beat them. Well, here's what's about to happen. Jalen Milroe will inevitably start. I am fully convinced he was suspended yesterday, by the way. That's why I don't think he played. That won't be announced. That'll never be confirmed. I think he was suspended, and I'm not alone in that. Anyway, Jalen Milroe will probably start against Ole Miss. Their defense is quietly a great story. It better be, because they can't score right now to save their lives. I think Milroe will start Saturday. I think in turn you'll see an inspired effort from their team, and maybe it's a trigger point for them. I don't know. But my bigger question is not will we see much better effort from them Saturday. I'm sure we will. My question is, what does that look like? Like, what is the ceiling for Alabama? What's the max potential for Alabama in 2023? Certainly probably well below that which people like me expected. But then again, you look around the rest of the country, where are the elite teams? Hey, by the way, there may be elite teams out there. Maybe it's just not the ones that anyone had in their preseason top 5. And that includes me. I didn't have Washington in my preseason top 5. I didn't have Oklahoma or Notre Dame up there. And I'm not saying they're elite. I'm just saying maybe those end up being the candidates. Or maybe those end up being the candidates for the best teams in a season that's just filled with a bunch of very good teams and no elite teams. Be that as it may, my point there is, believe it or not, all hope is still not lost for this team. All hope is still not lost. I get tired of saying this because it sounds so redundant, but we see it every year. There are teams that are left for dead, talented teams, in September, and then all of a sudden, whichever combination the dominoes need to be put in to click, it happens, and there are certain events that happen, and sometimes those events are really ugly. I think one may have happened for Georgia yesterday, by the way. Sometimes those events in the moment are very uncomfortable, they're very ugly, but for whatever reason, that's the snap moment, that's the trigger moment. And then you find yourself in November looking back saying, wow, can you believe this? This is the same team that looked like that in week 1 or week 2. Happens every year. It could easily happen with Alabama. The reason that it's so hard to see is because no one has the magic 8 ball. Wilfong has one for recruiting, but even Wilfong, even Uncle Steve doesn't have one for actual on-field matters. So I don't know if what happened yesterday is an impetus for anything. I don't know if Jalen Milroe being inserted, and I assume he will be, back into the lineup on Saturday is an impetus for anything. I've got a sneaking suspicion it is. Alabama opened as about a 6 to 7 point favorite over Ole Miss. I imagine odds makers will drown in Ole Miss money. And on a related note, shame on Lane Kiffin for the backdoor cover against Georgia Tech last night. Didn't need to do that. Derailed the Ramen Noodle Express. And so we'll deal with that later. It's okay. I'm not mad. I'm more disappointed than mad. But yeah, conference play is here. There's no more time to experiment. This is it. And I have no earthly idea how it's going to turn out. So there you go.